All right, hello everybody. Today we're going to start taking a look at uh, actually using your research sheet and taking a look at the different types of topics you need to research when it comes to your genetic disorder. And where it is you can find some of this information. So I've provided you with some websites that have some really good information, but I'm going to show you a little bit about how to use those websites and just how helpful they may be. So your first slide, really it'll be your second slide. Your first slide is going to be a title slide. Or a title page slide, but your first topic is going to be kind of just a brief description of your genetic disorder. So you need to kind of just briefly describe what it is. You don't need to go into a lot of detail here. You'll be talking a lot more about your disorder in other slides, but just a little synopsis of what that disorder is all about. We're going to look to see if we can find some history. We're going to explain where the disorder name came from if you possibly can, and then find out whether or not there are some other names. So if we go to, let's see, we're going to go to my blog, and if you were to click on the first website, you would come to, well, you'd actually come to, let me take you back. You would come to a page that looks like this. I'm going to use Rett syndrome again for my example. And so I would go to the letter R and I would scroll down. I'm looking for R-E-T-T, so I got to get to R-E's. Scroll down, I'm at R-E, now I got to get to R-E-T. Scroll down a little bit further, here we go. Just real quickly, I'm sure if you've looked at this website at all, you've noticed that there are thousands and thousands of these genetic disorders. So I will click on Rett syndrome. And it starts right off with a description. Now this may go into a little more detail than we need to for this first slide. It may have a lot of vocabulary that we don't necessarily need to use in this first slide, but it gives us a little bit of an idea here of the description. So this would be one place that we would look. Also, I showed you in our last video about also looking up your disorder along with the word foundation, and that brought us to a Google page that suggested this website here, which looks like a really good one. We click on About Rett Syndrome, and right here again is a little description of Rett syndrome. So that will be very helpful in getting that information. Once again, it says to talk about the history if available. Well, if we go back here, there's not really a whole lot about history on this page. It talks about a lot of things, but history isn't one of them. However, if I go over here to the foundation page, rettsyndrome.org, and I scroll down, I can see, oh look, I've got a history of Rett. So you may have to explore some different websites in order to find the history. And so if I click on that, I'll find out about how it got named and what its history is and that sort of thing. So, so that would help us with both the history and also explaining where the name came from. As it happens with Rett syndrome, it happens to have come from the name of the doctor who first started really doing a lot of research about it and discovered it. Other names for the disorder. Some disorders only have one name, but again, if we go to this website here, this is actually, it's a government website. So it's the Genetics Home Reference from the U.S. National Library of Medicine. And this is just a really great starting point for a lot of this. If you look down, you're going to see there is a section called Other Names for this condition. Very helpful. And here we have a list. Yes, it's Rett syndrome, but there are also other names here. Rett disorder, Rett's disorder, RTT, autism, dementia, ataxia, loss of purposeful hand use syndrome. It's a rather long name, but so again, this website is really helpful because there we have the information about the other names right on this page. So that takes care of description. That doesn't mean those are the only places you're going to look for information for this, but those are some really good starting points. So let's move on to prevalence. Okay, how often does this disorder really occur? How often does it happen? So if we go back here, frequency, that means the same thing. How often does it, how frequently does it happen? And this one has a very brief amount of information on it. It's pretty straightforward. So it affects about 1 in every 9 to 10,000 females. It is, as if you were to do more research on Rett, you'd find out it does happen on occasion in males, but it's very, very rare. Almost always females. And so that would give us some information for that. So we're looking how often does it occur? You might find information about that having to do with the whole world, which is what that stat that we had that we just looked at, or maybe in the United States. It will tell you, it should tell you, whether it's talking about the whole world or just a particular area. If it doesn't say, then it's talking about the whole world. Then it asks, does it occur more often in certain people groups? In this case, yes, much more often in females. But when it occurs in males, as it happens with Rett syndrome, it's almost always fatal or very, very drastic. Okay, so our next topic, and this is a tough one. This is causes, and this really gets to the heart of the genetics part of this. So this is where we want to make sure that we do some careful research, because this is what we've been learning about, and this is what we want to make sure we understand as best that we can. Now, most of these websites are going to get pretty technical, so we're looking to describe how a person gets the disorder. In other words, we know we're dealing with genetic disorders, so we know it has to do with the genes or the DNA, but is it inherited from the parents? Or is it because of a mutation that happens at some other time after the baby has been conceived? Does it happen later on? Which means that it's not necessarily inherited. Sometimes it's a combination. You know, if it's inherited, is it dominant or recessive? Is it a random mutation? Then describe. If you can find out what chromosome or what gene is mutated, a lot of times it's several different genes. So if we go back to our websites again, I'm going to close the frequency part so I don't have to keep scrolling through that. I'm even going to close the description for right now, and you'll see that there's a place here called causes. So we're going to click on that. Now, if we read through this, we're going to find that there's a lot of technical stuff here, but we want to look for some keywords so we can see it's caused by mutations in a gene called MECP2. All right, that's an important piece of information. We can see what this gene does and why it's important, and why it affects people. So that's important information. You also want to look at inheritance pattern, because we want to know, is it inherited? Well, it tells us here in this particular syndrome, 99% of people, there's no history of the disorder in their family, so they're not getting it from their parents. It's a new mutation that happens in that gene. All right. However, we can see here it's an X-linked dominant pattern. So that helps us to answer some of what was asked. So when in the few families where you see it happen, if you see a pattern of it happening in the family, tends to be an X-linked disorder. Okay. One of the things I want to show you here, if you were to go back to my blog and go to the second website, This is also a really good website. Okay, and it has information about several different syndromes and disorders, not as many as the first website. You'll see it ends right about there. However, one thing that it has right here, a glossary of genetic terms. If you run into a word, and you're going to run into some words that you don't understand, go to this website. Again, it's the second one down on my blog. Scroll down till you see the glossary, click on it, and it will bring you here, and you can look up some of those words that you're not familiar with. All right, so take advantage of that. One other thing that I just want to say real quickly before we finish up today's video, part 2 in our series of several videos. But one last thing I want to say, as you're doing your research, YouTube can actually be really helpful too. So if I look up Rett syndrome on YouTube, I can actually see here that there are some videos living with Rett syndrome, and it's put out by Cincinnati Children's, which means Cincinnati Children's Hospital, which means it's probably a really well done video and has good quality information. What is Rett syndrome by Texas Children's Hospital? Again, that sounds like a place that would have good quality information. Working to reverse Rett syndrome, so that we'll talk about some of the research that's being done and some of the treatments that are being tried. UMass Medical School, again, a really good resource. There are a lot of these osmosis videos. I'm just going to click on this one. Unfortunately for Rett syndrome, Rett syndrome does not have a really good one here. It's just a preview, and they want you to go to their website and sign up to be able to see their videos. But there are a lot of these same videos by Osmosis where they put the full thing on YouTube, and so you can actually take, definitely if you see an Osmosis video about your disorder, click on it, and if it's more than just a few seconds, it's going to have some really good information for you. But there are a lot of your disorders that if you go to YouTube, you're going to find some good information here as well for your research. If you use one of these videos, just make sure that you click on the link and type out the name of the video and put that in your resources slide. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's all for today. Have a great day.